I still remember the exact moment my parents told me I'd have to figure out college funding on my own, while my sister got handed an $80,000 Tesla for her 21st birthday. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about family, fairness, and my own worth. If you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your family, like your achievements don't matter as much as someone else's existence, this story is for you. My name is Melissa, I'm 32 now, and I spent the first 25 years of my life believing I was the problem in my family. I thought I wasn't trying hard enough, wasn't lovable enough, wasn't worthy of the same investment my parents made in my younger sister Emma. It took years of therapy and building my own success to realize that some families have favorite children, and some children are expected to be grateful for scraps while watching their siblings feast. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Let me take you back to where this all started, because understanding my family's dynamics is crucial to understanding how deep this betrayal went. I was 3 when Emma was born, and from the moment she arrived, everything changed. My parents, Linda and Robert, both successful professionals in their 50s now, seemed to view Emma as this precious miracle child, while I became the responsible older sister whose job was to help raise her. Growing up, the differences in treatment were subtle but constant. Emma got the bigger bedroom when we moved to our new house because she needed more space for her toys. I got told to share and be understanding. Emma got private piano lessons, dance classes, and art camps while I was told activities build character, but we couldn't afford everything for everyone. When Emma struggled in school, my parents hired tutors and bought special programs. When I struggled with math in 7th grade, I was told to work harder and figure it out. The pattern was always the same. Emma's needs came first, Emma's wants were priorities, and my role was to be the mature, understanding daughter who didn't ask for too much. By high school, I had learned to work part-time jobs to buy my own clothes and school supplies, while Emma's room overflowed with shopping bags. From the mall trips I wasn't invited on, but I was a good student, determined to prove myself worthy of the investment I craved. I graduated valedictorian, scored 1520 on my SATs, and got accepted to Northwestern University with a partial academic scholarship. I was so proud when I brought home that acceptance letter, thinking finally, this would be when my parents recognized my potential and invested in my future the way they invested in Emma's present. I remember sitting at our kitchen table, the acceptance letter spread out in front of us, explaining that even with my scholarship, I'd need about $25,000 per year to cover tuition, room, and board. My parents looked at each other with that expression I'd seen so many times. The one that meant they were calculating whether I was worth the expense. My father spoke first, explaining that they'd already committed to significant expenses for Emma's activities and that Northwestern was expensive. My mother added that there were perfectly good state schools I could attend for less money, and that taking out student loans would teach me responsibility and help me value my education more. They presented it as a character-building opportunity, a chance for me to prove my independence and maturity. What they didn't mention, and what I wouldn't discover until much later, was that they had already started setting aside money for Emma's college fund, despite her being only 15 at the time. They also didn't mention the $50,000 sitting in their savings account earmarked for a family vacation to Europe that summer, or the fact that my father had just received a $40,000 bonus from his law firm. So I did what I always did. I figured it out myself. I took out $30,000 in student loans, worked 20 hours a week at the campus library, spent summers working internships in Chicago instead of coming home, and graduated summa cum laude with a degree in business and a minor in psychology. I was proud of myself for making it work, for proving I could succeed without their help. Meanwhile, Emma coasted through high school with average grades, changed her mind about college majors 6 times, and had every whim catered to. She wanted to try photography, so my parents bought her a $3,000 camera setup. She decided she might want to be a veterinarian, so they paid for her to volunteer at an expensive animal clinic program. When she announced she was interested in fashion, they hired a consultant to help her build a portfolio and paid for her to attend a summer program in Paris. The Tesla incident happened during my senior year of college. I was 21, stressed about finding a job, worried about my student loan payments that would start after graduation, and Emma had just turned 21 herself. She had been dropping hints about wanting a car, complaining that taking the bus to her community college classes was beneath her social status. I came home for spring break, exhausted from balancing my final semester with 2 part-time jobs and an unpaid internship that I hoped would lead to full-time employment. I walked into our garage to get something from storage and found it, a brand new Tesla Model S, pristine white with red interior, wrapped in an enormous red bow. My parents were so excited to show it off, explaining how they wanted to surprise Emma when she got home from her spring break trip to Cabo with friends. They talked about the environmental benefits, the safety features, and how Emma deserved something special for working so hard in school. They mentioned the price casually, like $80,000 was pocket change, discussing the extended warranty and premium package they'd added. Standing there in that garage, looking at a car that cost more than my entire college education, something shifted inside me. I realized this wasn't about different parenting styles or Emma needing more support. This was about fundamental inequality in how my parents viewed their daughter's worth. I didn't say anything that day. I smiled, agreed that Emma would love it, and helped them plan the surprise reveal. But inside, I started doing calculations. $80,000 for a car versus forcing me to take loans for college. $80,000 spent without hesitation versus years of being told we couldn't afford things I needed. After graduation, I moved to Chicago and threw myself into building my career. I got hired at a mid-level marketing firm, lived in a studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood, and put every extra dollar toward paying off my student loans ahead of schedule. I was determined to prove that their lack of investment in me had been their loss, not mine. Meanwhile, Emma started and dropped out of 3 different colleges, changed majors 4 times, and moved back home to figure herself out. My parents supported every decision, funding her wandering journey of self-discovery while expressing concern that I was working too hard and not finding balance in my life. The years that followed established a clear pattern. Emma's mistakes were learning experiences that deserved continued support. My successes were expected and rarely acknowledged. When I got promoted to marketing manager at 24, my parents mentioned it briefly at dinner and then spent an hour discussing Emma's new interest in becoming a yoga instructor and the cost of certification programs. When Emma crashed the Tesla 6 months after getting it, driving distracted while texting, my parents immediately bought her a replacement, BMW, and increased her car insurance coverage. When I mentioned that I was struggling to make ends meet while aggressively paying down my loans, I was told that financial difficulties build character and that I should be proud of my independence. The real breaking point came when I was 26. I'd been working 60-hour weeks, had gotten another promotion, and was finally making decent money. I'd also met David, an amazing man who loved and supported my ambitions. When we got engaged, I was over the moon, thinking this might be the moment my family celebrated my happiness the way they celebrated Emma's every minor accomplishment. I called to share the news, excited about planning a wedding and hoping my parents might offer to help the way parents traditionally do for their daughters. The response was congratulations, followed immediately by concerns about the expense and suggestions that we should keep things simple and small. My mother mentioned that weddings were incredibly expensive and that they hoped we weren't expecting them to contribute significantly, especially with Emma starting another college program that fall. That's when I learned that my parents had not only agreed to pay for Emma's 4th attempt at college, but had also committed to funding her spring semester study abroad program in Italy. The program cost $35,000 for 1 semester. I was planning a wedding on a $15,000 budget, while Emma was getting a European vacation disguised as education. But the real devastation came during the wedding planning process itself. My parents agreed to contribute $5,000 toward the wedding, which I was grateful for until I discovered they had spent $12,000 on Emma's 23rd birthday party the month before. Not a milestone birthday, not a graduation celebration, just a regular birthday party because Emma wanted to celebrate at an upscale restaurant with 30 of her friends. I started documenting everything then, not out of spite, but out of a desperate need to understand if I was going crazy or if the inequality was real. I made spreadsheets, calculated expenses, tracked the differential treatment. Over the course of 5 years, my parents had spent approximately $180,000 on Emma's various pursuits, cars, and lifestyle, while contributing exactly $5,000 to my major life events. The wedding was beautiful, despite the budget constraints. David and I made it work with creativity and careful planning. My parents attended, smiled in photos, and gave a perfectly polite speech about how proud they were. Then they left early because Emma had called with some crisis that needed their immediate attention. After the wedding, I decided to focus on building the life David and I wanted without expecting anything from my family. I was tired of feeling disappointed and resentful. I threw myself into my career, took night classes to earn my MBA, and started developing a business plan for my own marketing consultancy. The consultancy took off faster than I had dreamed possible. Within 2 years, I was managing major corporate accounts, had hired 3 employees, and was generating 6-figure revenues. I was featured in business journals, won several Young Entrepreneur Awards, and was invited to speak at industry conferences. Through it all, my parents' response was polite but underwhelming. They'd mention my achievements briefly at family gatherings, and then shift focus to Emma's latest interests or struggles. When I made the Forbes 30 Under 30 list at 29, my mother called to congratulate me and then immediately started talking about Emma's new boyfriend and whether they thought he was marriage material. Meanwhile, Emma was still floating through life, supported entirely by our parents. She had tried college 4 times, had 3 different career focuses, and was currently working part-time at a boutique while living at home rent-free. Every time she expressed interest in something new, my parents funded it. Every time she struggled or failed, they increased their support. The turning point came when I was 30. My business had grown to the point where I was considering opening a second office, and David and I were talking about starting a family. We had purchased a beautiful home in a great neighborhood and were finally feeling financially secure and stable. That's when my parents called with a request that would change everything forever. Emma had decided she wanted to open her own boutique, and they were wondering if I might be willing to co-sign a business loan for her since their credit was stretched from all the previous investments in her ventures. They explained it so casually, as if asking me to guarantee debt for my sister's 4th business idea was a completely reasonable request. They mentioned that they knew I was doing well financially and that family should support family. They suggested that my business success meant I should help lift Emma up to the same level. Sitting in my office, listening to my mother explain why I should risk my financial security for Emma's latest whim, something inside me snapped. Not with anger, but with clarity. I realized that in their minds, my success wasn't mine to enjoy. It was a resource for them to exploit for Emma's benefit. I told them I needed to think about it and spent the next week having conversations with David and my therapist about what this request really meant. My therapist helped me understand that this was the ultimate expression of the family dynamic I'd been living with my entire life. My achievements were tools to serve Emma's needs. My financial security was something to be leveraged for her dreams. Decided it was time to have the conversation I'd been avoiding for years. I invited my parents and Emma to dinner at my house, ostensibly to discuss the loan request. I prepared carefully, not with anger, but with documentation and a clear understanding of what I needed to say. When they arrived, they were in good spirits, probably expecting me to agree to co-sign the loan. My mother complimented the house. My father talked about my successful business, and Emma chatted about her boutique plans as if my agreement was a foregone conclusion. I served dinner and then brought out a folder I had prepared. Inside were printouts of financial records, timelines, and calculations I had been tracking for years. I started by acknowledging that I knew they had always done their best as parents, but that I needed to address some patterns that had affected our family relationships. I went through the numbers methodically. The $180,000 spent on Emma's pursuits versus the $5,000 contributed to my wedding. The Tesla and BMW purchases versus forcing me to take student loans. The multiple college funding versus working through my MBA. The European trips and private programs versus budgeting for my own business clothes. What struck me wasn't just the dollar amounts, though they were stark. It was watching their faces as I presented the information. My parents looked genuinely shocked, as if they had never considered the cumulative impact of their choices. Emma looked defensive and uncomfortable, probably realizing for the first time that her lifestyle hadn't been normal or earned. My mother started to interrupt, beginning to explain about different circumstances and Emma needing more support. But I asked her to let me finish. I explained that I wasn't angry about the past, but that I needed them to understand why co-signing a loan for Emma felt like the final insult in a pattern of inequality. I told them about working multiple jobs through college while Emma vacationed in Europe. I described building my business with savings scraped together from years of careful budgeting, while Emma had every interest funded without question. I explained what it felt like to be told we couldn't afford things I needed while watching tens of thousands get spent on things Emma wanted. The most powerful moment came when I pulled out my laptop and showed them my business financial statements. My company had generated $1.2 million in revenue the previous year. I had been featured in 3 major business publications. I had a waiting list of potential clients and had turned down acquisition offers from larger firms because I loved the independence. Their shock was visible. I don't think they had truly understood the scale of what I had built, perhaps because they had never asked for details or shown genuine interest in my work. They had been politely proud while remaining fundamentally uninvested in my success. Then I addressed the loan request directly. I explained that Emma had already had more startup capital invested in her various ventures than most entrepreneurs ever see. The boutique idea was her 4th business concept, none of which had progressed beyond the planning stage. Meanwhile, I had built my success through careful planning, calculated risks, and personal investment. I told them that I would not be co-signing any loans for Emma, not out of spite, but because it would perpetuate the exact dynamic that had damaged our family relationships. Emma needed to learn to succeed or fail based on her own efforts, just as I had been forced to do. The conversation that followed was painful but necessary. My parents tried to explain their reasoning, talking about Emma being more sensitive and needing more support, about me being naturally more capable and independent. They suggested that successful people have an obligation to help family members who struggle more. My father mentioned that they had always been proud of my achievements, seeming genuinely confused about why I felt unsupported. My mother talked about different children needing different types of help, as if systematic favoritism was a thoughtful parenting strategy rather than emotional neglect. Emma finally spoke up, and what she said revealed everything I needed to know about how she viewed our relationship. She expressed hurt that I was being selfish after everything our parents had done for me, mentioning my education and wedding contribution as if those minimal investments somehow balanced years of inequality. She accused me of being jealous of her lifestyle and using my business success to punish the family. What struck me wasn't her defensiveness, which I expected, but her complete inability to recognize the disparity in our treatment. In her mind, the small amounts invested in my life were equivalent to the massive ongoing support she received. She genuinely seemed to believe that my success was evidence that I had received equal support rather than evidence that I had succeeded despite unequal treatment. I realized in that moment that my family had fundamentally different definitions of fairness, support, and love than I did. To them, giving each child what they thought we needed was equity. To me, the systematic preference for one child over another was a betrayal of basic family principles. I ended the conversation by setting clear boundaries. I would not be participating in any more financial support for Emma until she demonstrated the same independence and self-sufficiency that had been required of me. I would not be attending family events where my achievements were minimized while Emma's struggles were centered. I would not be available for crisis management or problem solving for issues that my parents had the resources to address themselves. Most importantly, I told them that rebuilding our relationships would require them to acknowledge the inequality in how they had treated their daughters and make concrete changes in how they approached family dynamics going forward. The weeks that followed were difficult. My parents called repeatedly, alternating between defensiveness and attempts at reconciliation. They suggested family therapy, which I agreed to attend, hoping professional guidance might help them understand the impact of their choices. The family therapy sessions were revelatory. Our therapist, Dr. Martinez, helped my parents see patterns they had been blind to for decades. She used the term golden child and scapegoat dynamic to describe what I had lived with, explaining how some families unconsciously designate one child as the perfect one who needs protection and another as the strong one who needs challenges. Dr. Martinez helped my parents understand that their different treatment hadn't been based on our actual needs or capabilities, but on their own unconscious biases and comfort levels. Emma's struggles had felt manageable to solve with money and support, while my independence had been convenient for them to rely on rather than nurture. The breakthrough came when Dr. Martinez asked my parents to imagine how they would feel if their own parents had funded their siblings' lifestyle while forcing them to struggle financially. The role reversal exercise seemed to finally help them grasp the emotional impact of their choices. Emma stopped attending therapy after 3 sessions, claiming it was too negative and focused on the past. My parents continued for several months, working through their own patterns and learning about fair treatment strategies they should have implemented years earlier. The real change came when my father called to tell me they had decided to pay off my remaining student loans as a gesture of recognition for the inequality I had faced. It was approximately $15,000 at that point, a small amount compared to what they had spent on Emma, but the gesture meant more than the money. It was acknowledgement that their treatment had been unfair. They also informed me that they were transitioning Emma to financial independence over the next year, starting with requiring her to pay rent if she continued living at home and cutting off funding for any new ventures until she completed her current commitments. The changes weren't immediate or perfect. Emma struggled with the transition and blamed me for destroying the family harmony. My parents occasionally slipped back into old patterns, but they were more conscious of their choices and more willing to be corrected when imbalances occurred. What surprised me most was how much my own success accelerated once I stopped seeking their validation. My business grew exponentially. I was invited to join the board of directors for a nonprofit supporting women entrepreneurs, and I was accepted into a prestigious business leadership program. David and I also started our family, welcoming our daughter Sophia 2 years after that difficult dinner conversation. Watching my parents interact with their granddaughter has been healing. Seeing them offer love and support without the complicated dynamics that had shaped my childhood. The most profound change has been in my relationship with myself. I no longer measure my worth by my family's investment in my life or compare my achievements to Emma's privileges. I understand now that their lack of support had nothing to do with my value and everything to do with their own limitations as parents. Emma. And I have a cordial but distant relationship now. She never fully accepted responsibility for her role in the family dynamics, and she never acknowledged the advantages she had been given. We exchange pleasantries at family gatherings and send birthday cards, but we don't have the close sister relationship I once hoped for. My parents and I have rebuilt a relationship based on mutual respect rather than old patterns. They've learned to ask about my business with genuine interest, to celebrate my achievements without immediately shifting focus to Emma's needs, and to treat me as an adult daughter rather than a family resource. The most important lesson I've learned is that you cannot control how family members treat you, but you can control how much access they have to your life and energy. Setting boundaries isn't punishment, it's protection. Requiring respect isn't selfishness, it's self-care. I've also learned that success is the best response to people who underestimate you, but only if you define success for yourself rather than seeking their validation. My business thrives because I built it for my own goals, not to prove anything to my family. My happiness comes from the life David and I have created, not from finally earning my parents' equal treatment. Looking back now, I'm almost grateful for the struggle. Being forced to be independent made me stronger, more resourceful, and more determined than I might have been with easy support. Having to prove myself repeatedly taught me not to take success for granted and to appreciate every achievement. But I'm also clear that children shouldn't have to earn their parents' love and support through achievements. Kids shouldn't have to choose between being the favorite and being forgotten. Families should celebrate all their children's successes and support all their children's struggles with equal energy and resources. If you're living in a family where one sibling gets everything while you get explanations about character building, please know that you're not imagining the inequality. If you're being told that you're selfish for wanting the same support your siblings receive automatically, please know that wanting fair treatment isn't selfish. Your worth isn't determined by how much your family invests in your life. Your potential isn't limited by their lack of belief in you. Your success doesn't depend on their support, though having it would make the journey easier. The hardest truth I've learned is that some families don't know how to love all their children equally, and that limitation belongs to them, not to you. You can build an amazing life despite their shortcomings, and you can create the kind of family for your own children that you wished you had experienced. Today, my business employs 12 people and has been featured as one of the fastest growing marketing firms in the Midwest. I was recently asked to write a book about entrepreneurship and family dynamics. Sophia is 2 years old and already shows signs of the determination that got me through those difficult years, but she'll never have to prove her worth to earn. Her parents' support. My parents now brag about my achievements to their friends and ask thoughtful questions about my business plans. Emma is slowly learning to support herself, though she still struggles with the concept that success requires effort and persistence. Our family isn't perfect, but it's functional in ways it never was when I was growing up. The measure of a family isn't whether everyone succeeds equally, but whether everyone gets equal opportunity and support to pursue their own version of success. The measure of a parent isn't whether their children all turn out the same, but whether each child feels loved and valued for who they are. I want to know, have you experienced this kind of inequality in your own family? Are you the child who had to figure everything out alone while watching a sibling get every advantage? Or maybe you're the parent trying to break these patterns with your own children. Share your story in the comments below, because I think there are more of us than we realize. And sometimes knowing we're not alone makes all the difference. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content about family dynamics, entrepreneurship, and building the life you want despite the obstacles you face. Remember, your worth was never determined by how much others invested in you. It was always determined by how much you were willing to invest in yourself.